welcome back. This is season 5, episode 3. Thank you for sticking around. Now, I didn't realize becoming a military spouse would change my life. Not immediately. At the beginning, it just sounded like a title, not an identity. And the truth is, I didn't even know that term military spouse existed. Hi, my name is Lydia, and on this channel we ground ourselves and we name what is. So I share real life stories in the context of and about transitions, not the polished versions, just the honest ones, so that when life is shifting under your feet, you don't feel alone or unstable while you're figuring things out. Because sometimes we are living a transition long before we understand what it is. And I'm hoping through this journey, we can all understand and go through transitions easier or better or knowledgeable. Now, when I got married, I knew my husband had a military career. Or can I say military career? I just thought he was a military person. I knew the job would be demanding because we had talked about that conversation before. And if you remember that conversation about marriage and how what conversations to have and some of the hard ones we didn't have, this was one of those. I didn't really know what military was. I didn't understand what his career would be like. I didn't really go deep. We didn't go deep into what that would mean for us. Well, for him, he knew, but for me, I didn't know that part. Because where I came from, which is Kenya, or where I still come from, the military is not a central part of everyday life the way it is here in the United States. Here, it's different because as little as there was a time we were in the mall and there was this little kid, I think 4 or 5, my husband had his military uniform and the little boy just came and said, "Thank you for your service." And I think my jaw almost dropped to the floor because I didn't understand what is this thing. But then now it slowly started to get into the fact that, the military is an integral part of life in America. Now, there is not an identity built around military families where I come from. There are no spouse communities like, the military spouses in here. There's nothing like that. There is not even a name for it. So I thought I was simply marrying someone with a unique profession, I think at that point I had one friend who I knew was in the military. Did I even know whether she was in the Air Force, Army? I didn't know. I just knew she was in the military. And so I didn't realize I was stepping into a system. At first, nothing dramatic happened. Life just started organizing itself around the military. And I realized that when, we were talking about schedules, we started talking about planning life around assignments, conversations about postings. I started learning new terminology that was so unfamiliar. Deers, you have to be on deers. And tricare, those were the 2 most commonly used that I started to be like, okay. And then the possibility of relocation. And that possibility of relocation came when in the previous episode, remember I told you my legal credentials didn't transfer. So we had this conversation about how about I go back to school and study law and get back into my profession as I wanted to. And now this possibility of relocation started to come up. And at this point, he is still outside of the country. It's just within the year that he is outside, and I'm also trying to figure out what my next steps are. And then I hear, well, did you know that in America, every state has different laws, different certification requirements for people to be lawyers and stuff like that? And I'm like, come again? So I start to understand slowly how this military life was going to affect me. I wanted so desperately to recertify or to be an attorney or whatever you call it. But the chances of it coming to be were slowly and slowly dying, because military life meant when he moved back, we might not have the choice to stay in the same state where we were. And we didn't know the next state where he would go, and if that state would recognize the education I had had in a different state, or if I needed to retake the bar or something like that. So it was so confusing. And anyway, all these things to say, it was subtle. But slowly I realized something important. His career would determine where we lived. And if his career determined where we lived, it would also determine what I could build. This was not something anyone forced on me. Let's get that very clear. But it was something I had to adjust to. And thinking about it, I'm wishing I knew what it meant for me to adjust to it. I wish I understood fully what it would mean to be a military spouse. Because I had always imagined building a career with stability, choosing where I lived, planning long term. But military life doesn't operate on long-term personal plans. It doesn't. Well, guys, when your environment becomes unpredictable, your planning horizon changes. You stop thinking 5 or 10 years ahead, which you used to. You start thinking one assignment at a time. And that uncertainty slowly changes how you imagine your future, particularly in the context of career, in the context of autonomy, in the context of agency, in the context of independence, in the context of a whole lot. At the time, I thought these were just personal circumstances, just life adjustments. I didn't realize there was an entire community of people living the same reality that I was. In fact, I didn't even learn the term military spouse until my husband was preparing to retire. By that time, I don't know, I don't want to say it's too late. But by the time I heard the name, I had already lived most of that experience. Imagine, 12 years in. And that realization taught me something. Something very important about being an immigrant. When you move to a new country, you don't just learn geography. You have to learn the language of the systems around you. What are those support structures? What are those identities people use? What are the communities that exist around your circumstances? What are the resources available for you? It took me a while to even notice some states have a lot of resources regarding even language, learning new languages, transitioning into a country, and all these things that can support an immigrant. Because what is important is when you don't know the language of that environment you're in, you can miss support that was actually there all along. And sometimes I look back and I wonder, remember when I talked about when you destabilize, sometimes you internalize it as personal failure. And I wonder, was it me? Was it the people I hang out with? Was it... And there's really no one I can blame. Except my circumstances were just my circumstances. And in fact, I have taken those circumstances, however painful, however hard they were, and I have turned them into a purpose. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Stick around. Well, for years I didn't know there were networks of military spouses, communities, programs, people navigating the exact same questions I had. And that experience taught me something I wish every immigrant understood earlier. In a new country, resources exist everywhere. But your mind has to transition first. Your mind has to transition first. You have to realize I am in a different environment. You have to learn how the systems work, because systems are different in different environments. If you don't take anything from me today, please learn that your mind has to transition first, because it is what you know and what you understand and how you take your new environment that will determine your next steps. So if you're navigating a new country, a new role, or a new stage of life, please don't assume you have to figure everything out alone. Ask questions, observe how things work, because the moment you learn the language of a system, you gain access to the support that you need and that is inside it. But even without knowing the name military spouse, I was still living the reality of that life. The relocations, the uncertainty, and eventually the isolation. And that isolation is where this story gets heavier, my people. Because building a life in a new country is one thing. Doing it without some support is something else entirely. And doing it while your brain is still functioning in a different country is a different thing. Thanks for staying. Becoming is not one big moment. It is a series of small, quiet transitions. And we all deserve gentleness through all of them. We all deserve support. We all deserve the names that come along with them and the structure, and so we can navigate life's transitions smoother. If you've ever stepped into a role that reshaped your life more than you expected, please tell me in the comments. What identity quietly shaped your path or changed it? And if this story resonates, please subscribe, like, and share with someone who might need it. Because I'm telling this journey one chapter at a time. And the next one might explain something you have been carrying inside quietly. See you tomorrow.